Dr. Ali, are you with us?
Yes, I'm.
Okay,
fine.
please take your chair as the chairman of the session and start with Dr. Raj Paruda.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the conference. We've had very good exchanges, very rich presentations, very important statements made by a number of the high-level participants in the morning. It's been very inspiring, way of starting and getting this conference started. The second day, we are going to start with a presentation from Dr. Raj Paroda, who is the chairman of the Trust for Advancement of Agricultural Sciences in India. He is also the former founding chair of the Global Forum of Agricultural Research, and most importantly, a prominent scientist in the dryland research, a global scientist in terms of his contribution to the advancement of dryland research, and a very well recognized and prominent scientist in India. We're very glad, Dr. Paroda, that you are with us this morning with your presentation. And before I hand over to you the microphone to start, I want to wish you a very happy birthday for your 80th anniversary. So I want everyone to join us in wishing you all the very best, inshallah, many years of good health and contributions to agricultural research. Thank you very much, Dr. Paroda. The floor is yours.
Thank you. May I share I'll just share my screen.
Please, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Ali, for your generous introduction and good wishes, which I appreciate very much. I am really pleased to participate in this webinar to share some of my thoughts on genetic resources for adaptation to climate change in drylands. We are all aware, I need not go into these details more, but agriculture system contributes about 30% of the climate change problems, starting from land use, land degradation, forest cover, cropland, burning biomass, and from agriculture, livestock, fertilizer use, rice cultivation, and above all, post-harvest losses, which are about 6%. So we definitely have to look at agriculture to solve the problem of climate change holistically. Climate change is a reality. Again, it was mentioned yesterday. Temperature is rising. We are having heavy precipitation. Floods are now experienced even in Jordan. There were floods and contraction of rainy days, frequent droughts, and rise in temperature. Even in desert part of Rajasthan, we had floods in 2-3 cities this year. And melting of glacier and decline in snow cover is already taking place. So what we need is to look for genetic resources that can tolerate high temperature. The temperature is expected to even rise up to 4 to 5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century if nothing is done to arrest the damage that we are causing to the environment. And similarly, we would need also drought-tolerant materials because the recurrence of drought is also likely to increase. In that scenario, we now see that we are already in the midst of a perfect storm, climate change, land degradation, loss of biodiversity because of high population in arid lands that we represent from South Asia, Central Asia, and Siwana region. And we also have the food crisis, energy crisis. COVID has now taught these two big lessons recently, and population explosion is already taking place. And this, we see that globally there are already estimates of decline on the production in crops like wheat, maize, soybean, rice, etc., the prices are likely to increase by 4 to 5 times, and there is human cost, uh, food riots, humanitarian crisis, stock market losses, etc. So what we see is that even by the end of the century, if nothing is done, probably apple may not be cultivated in Japan. We already need to shift it to higher elevation where ice is now melting and high temperature is rising. So these kinds of adaptation also may possibly not be there in future if nothing seriously is done. In this context, again, in India, there are several studies with regard to the losses on crop yields due to climate change. They are ranging between 9 to 12% in case of wheat and rice. Even suitability of rain-fed rice may not be there in future. Probably rain-fed rice area may not be available at all. Grain protein in the case of wheat is likely to reduce by 1%. Zinc and iron content is also likely to reduce. So we need to look for a way forward. And what is the way forward? Way forward could be in a problem of that kind of climate change. It cannot be only localized. It has to be a global understanding because climate doesn't recognize geographical boundaries, but then we have to act locally. If we don't act, time is in fact now not in our favor, possibly for the posterity and future generation, something seriously would require to be done. To look at globally, we need to meet and have dialogues and understanding of the kind that we are having today. We had this, symposium organized on climate change in Japan through APARI in 2008, where 150 participants, mostly NARS leaders from all South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Pacific countries, and all CG Center senior experts had participated. There were good lessons there, and the messages were that you need to cope with climate change. Time is now not to just debate and wait whether climate change is going to occur and make any difference for us, but now we need to learn to live with the new environment, time for planting, changing varieties, new cropping systems. So these are the options that have to be thought of, soft options and hard options for mitigation that you have to look for, offsetting the causative factors such as reducing the net emission of greenhouse gases. Also, the second message was that you cannot continue depending on the unipillar approach of genetic resource management, which enabled us to have green revolution through dwarf, wheat, and rices. But now you would require to take care of natural resource management and good agronomic practices for sustainable intensification. In this direction, then we have to see that which are the crops where greater thrust should go in terms of good agronomic practices. We find that rice, particularly the lowland rice, then wheat and potato, then cotton and mustard are the crops which possibly require better agronomic practices at a faster pace than probably compared to most of the other crops, which are the crops of dryland region. But that doesn't mean we don't intend to go in for climate smart agriculture. That's where we will require our joint efforts. Agriculture is critical achieved through increase in resilience, that will be through adaptation, enhancing productivity through efficiency and reducing the greenhouse gases by mitigating the greenhouse gas emission, methane emission, by better use of nutrients and water and so on. In that respect, when we come to adaptation, a best example I can cite is that chickpea used to be earlier a crop only of North India, where the maturity period had been between 150 to 180 days. But then, thanks to the efforts made by the scientists to breed early maturing chickpea varieties, both by ICRISAT and ICARDA, we could now grow chickpea right in entire India up to the southern states. And that is a unique example of adaptation. So if there are changes going to take place, we will have to see in terms of options that are available through such genetic resources. Fortunately, Asia is a mega center of rich agrobiodiversity. Indus River Valley Civilization, Nile River Valley Civilization, Yellow River Valley Civilization are unique and perhaps the oldest civilization where people had settled and had taken care of agrobiodiversity, especially through the role of women. And today we are fortunate to have these genetic resources, or else so much of pressure of people per unit of land in the arid regions of Siwana, South Asia and Central Asia would have not been possible. So rich agrobiodiversity drylands is a real asset which needs to be explored, researched and used judiciously and conserved for future. Time is running out. Some are facing extinction already and this need to be stopped due to harsh climate and biotic and abiotic pressure. Under urgent need for strengthening research institutions and human resource and need for policy support and public awareness is very critical. So when we look at some of time is not much in my favor, I would not go into more details, but when you look at the variability starting from trees, perhaps this is the wonder tree that we have today in Thar Desert. This is unique. In every part of it is used economically, either by man or by animal, or even for raising the crop. The value of the land is on the basis of number of kg, that is Prosopis cineraria trees that one would have retained in their fields, and it doesn't affect the crop, and there is no smoothing effect at all. There are plants like shrubs of this kind. It is called cane, caparis, which is good for browsing of camel and goats, and is very useful for its fruit, which is used as vegetable in the dry area. And this vegetable can be kept for even a month without any deterioration in ambient temperature. So people use it when they used to travel earlier in the past days from one place to another when the transportation was also not a possibility. The plant like this, it's called Citrullus colocynthis, humba. You can't see it when you go otherwise during the entire year except rainy season. But its roots are always there in the sand dunes, and as soon as any precipitation takes place, it starts growing, it gives you fruits. The fruits are very good for animal feed, and this is considered to be a sand dune stabilizer. But hardly any research on these seem to have it. There are hundreds of these kinds. I don't have time to talk about. You look at the animals. The most useful animals giving good not only the milk but also the meat are from Thar Desert. When you look at cattle, you look at buffalo. The best milk buffalo breed is from Haryana called Murrah, giving almost about 15 to 20 liters of milk per day, and there are beautiful, looking buffaloes like Neeli Ravi from Punjab, Jafrabadi from Gujarat. So each state has, Bhadravi has very high fat content of 9 to 11%, but again, not much research has been done. And this Bunny buffalo from Gujarat is from the desert part where it is maximum salinity and it only thrives on grasses and hardly any feed provided by the people for its raising. The grasses are unique again. The best grass in the desert, sandy loam soils I have ever seen anywhere is Ledurus indicus, but not much research has again been done, except in the last 2 decades by institutes like Central Arid Zone Research Institute in India. Sancharus, Panicum, Cymbopogon, I think Indigofera are many of these, but then we need to collect, conserve, and also evaluate and use them. Unique advantage of germplasm in drylands is that they are well adapted to stresses, both biotic and abiotic. They are useful genetic material for required genetic improvement that we are looking for, and a native resource. They are a resource from our own region for isolation of candidate genes. I am confining myself and my presentation only to South Asia because I know that Dr. Ali and others would talk about Siwana region in more details, and similar stories would be there. Now we want to see that these kinds of germplasm are improved like the pots on the top of the canopy, determinate plant habit in case of chickpea, and robust plant type with the strong stem for mechanical harvesting, etc., which otherwise is a problem in terms of lack of labor and costly harvesting operations. We are aware that in the past, green revolution would have not been possible had the dwarfing genes not been used. So we need to look at the genes which are needed for heat tolerance, for drought tolerance, and for other traits that are required for our future. And in that context, dwarfing gene in sorghum and also in pulse millet have been used quite extensively, and considerable benefits have been also harnessed. This green revolution would have not been possible had the plant type not been changed and made dwarf and photo insensitive and responsive to inputs. And here we find that there are salt tolerant rices, the irrigated wheat, irrigated rice, and with a very high productivity. So we need to see that we have genetic resources properly collected and conserved. When we look at, we find that there are large collections. This is the collection of the Indian Gene Bank, which today has large collection of arid zone. I am talking of arid zone plants. Otherwise, it has about 400,000 accessions in the Gene Bank today. But for these pulse millet, barnyard millet, minor millet, sorghum, moat, mung bean, they are especially the desert plants. Cluster bean are not grown anywhere else. Moat bean, Vigna, aconitifolia only grows in the desert. Reed mustard, you have these collections which need to be evaluated. Also in the gene banks of CG centers, ICRISAT, ICARDA, CEMET, IITA, we have good collections. And but when we look at, very few genetic resources have been used. Millet germplasm in the National Gene Bank, when we look at the minor millets, are now drawing more attention after COVID pandemic on the local food systems, which are good for health and which are easily available where they are needed. So we need to, in fact, think in terms of making use of these genetic resources. In ICRISAT, we have very good collection again of sorghum, pearl millet, finger millet, and these minor millets, though they didn't have mandate before, but now I understand after they have opted out of one CGIR, they are going to work very extensively on these minor millets, which are extremely useful and good for people in the drylands. So we need to harness science for new gains. Genetic resources are there. It is said that hardly 1% has also not been used. So we need to look in terms of now options like genomic, improvement through genome editing, GM crops, bioinformatics, use even for precision agriculture, artificial intelligence. Much was talked about all these, so I don't have to mention much. But all this can be possible if there is good public-private partnership and intellectual property protection. Without that, for innovation to scale would be a challenge. And in this context, again, when you have to improve them, at ICRISAT, it has been seen that pearl millet and sorghum, they have mini core collections. They have evaluated only 0.1% of germplasm use so far. Wide genetic variation exists. Wild and related species are very good source of adaptation. But then when this will be used is a major challenge which has to be looked at, and that would require institutions and trained human resource and support for agricultural research or development. We would require new plant types of this kind, as I said earlier, for chickpea, even for cluster bean. Cluster bean is only grown in the desert part of Rajasthan and Gujarat and is exported for its use as a most useful edible gum. And this doesn't interfere with human duct at all and is today known to be used in almost more than 100 value-added products abroad. But we need to improve, not much research on this. In case of pearl millet, so much of variability is existing. Hardly, as was mentioned, very little has been used. So we need high seed protein content, high seed iron content, high seed iron and zinc content, and also we need different quality of grain, which is better for storage for a longer period. This hybrid was released when I was dealing with crop research in the council in 1990, and this hybrid is still holding field. And there are many such examples. These kinds of materials could be taken at base for further improvement, but using the useful genetic resources and now the technologies like that of CRISPR-Cas for advancing the genetic improvement activity. This particular crop is unique. This is only grown in these arid regions of Rajasthan state from where I come. It is consistently having 1.5 million hectare area. There is no substitute for it. This is a best legume for snack purposes, and we need to improve it in terms of upright podding and also resistance to yellow mosaic virus. But relatively, again, state government is not laying as much emphasis as they should have. So it is mainly the Indian Council of Agriculture research support there. We need to go in for hybrids like biofortified hybrids to improve zinc, iron, and other protein, etc. And for that there is considerable scope. We need to protect by registering them. Unfortunately, India has Plant Variety Protection and Farmers Act, under which they need to be given the registration. Here, the registration is given to the community. This is the most salt-tolerant material in the whole world in case of wheat, called variety Kharchia. But we need now to go in for geographical location. And for many of these materials, whether the animal breeds, whether this one, like we have done for basmati rice, that kind of initiative also would be required. And these communities will have to be also helped so that they get some support for their environmental services. Genetic improvement in that slow growing tree which I showed you before, called KGD, Prosopis cinerea. Just by grafting, we could make it, spineless and also very huge podding type. And it can give us the plant of this kind in 5 to 6 years, as against 15 to more than 15 years for the normal Prosopis tree. And these kinds of genetic improvement are required, but possibly have not drawn that much attention in the past. So emphasis is needed on good institutional infrastructure, basic and strategic research, and capacity development. Institutions like the kind we have built for plant, animal, in Karnal, fish in Lucknow, for insects, useful insects in Bangalore, and for microorganisms in Mau. You have to take care of all these genetic resources. And we have to do basic research of the kind by which we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. In case of flooding in rice, you have this kind of methane emission. When you go for 7-day aeration, you reduce it. When you go for 14 days, you further reduce it. And when you go for 21 days, you completely reduce it. But this kind of research would require best infrastructure facilities, like for drought resistance, you would need these kinds of lysimetry complexes, which are now available at ICRISAT, or going for these kinds of, greenhouses where people are talking inside the hothouse of industry who look for the tolerance to high temperature. We would like to also have the genetic resources suitable for conservation agriculture, for crops, standing crop. You can plant mung bean, as you see here below the first slide, and you have to have crops which can, or varieties which can be better grown immediately after harvest of rice, that of wheat, etc. in the dryland area. So when we look at conservation agriculture, less than 1 million hectare was in 8 countries in 70. Now it is 205 million hectare in 112 countries. 15% of the world is now covering the conservation agriculture. And these are the countries. Earlier, there used to be slow progress of about 5 million hectare till we reached 100. But now, every year, we are having about 10 million hectare area increase under conservation agriculture. So we definitely would require in the rain-fed areas an aggressive approach of scaling such technologies which can lead to regenerative agriculture and also for sustainability. Here you see the terminal heat can also be taken care of by conservation agriculture as compared to when all residues are removed. And you also require carbon trading as an incentive to the farmers for their environmental services. And these can be the models for smallholder farmers designed by institutions, advanced institutions and international center for that, so that we can quantify if farmer has gone for direct seeded rice, no-till farming, crop rotation, for coverage of land for a greater period of the year, precision fertilizer use, use of biologicals, and no stable burning, and micro nutrient use, and also micro irrigation technique for good agronomic practices. And if these are done by the farmer, he must be compensated. We also need to implement our Paris Agreement and nationally determined contribution. I hope this issue will be discussed in again COP27 in Cairo next month, in November. And India has gone for ambitious target. As against 2020, we have 35, 40, and also a target of 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent for by going in for agricultural good practices. Recently in COP26, 5 commitments were made by the Prime Minister, and he had also given a call for the developed nations to go in for $1 trillion contribution for the climate fund. I hope it happens, but on the carbon sequestration side, it is only agriculture by which we will be able to achieve, and in agriculture, we will have to give high focus on agroforestry, because forest cover cannot be increased further, and also on conservation agriculture, and by going in for better management of livestock to reduce the carbon or rather methane emission. So the way forward, national policy and commitment on climate smart agriculture is required. Scientific land use planning, ecoregion wise, has to be done. There is no recipe for all, and strategic research network for scaling innovation is needed, involving international centers, NARS, and also private sector. Collaboration involving all stakeholders is therefore critical, and we do need institutions and capacity support. So finally, the conclusion, agriculture be not considered only a source but also the solution to address climate change problem. Climate smart agriculture be a national priority for all nations. Increase R&D funding, rather we say at least minimum double the funding whatever is being given today for scaling innovations around adaptation and mitigation. Strong interministerial and interinstitutional collaboration and convergence is needed. A mission-oriented action by all nations, because time is running out and we must act fast. So finally, the genetic resources are the building blocks for the human survival. These must be accessible. Unfortunately, they are not accessible because of now legal laws and also Nagoya Protocol and CVD. These must be accessible for use through benefit sharing. We must understand how to have benefit sharing and without hurdles for current use and for posterity. With this, I would like to conclude, Mr. Chair. I hope I have taken only 1 minute extra. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Paroda, for the very inspiring presentation and for sharing your thoughts about the way forward and conclusions, to which I fully subscribe myself and fully support. So
Dr. Ali, can I interrupt just for a minute, please? Because there is some remarks related to the previous presentation that will take maybe 2 minutes or something before you start kindly your presentation. So if you allow me.
Sure. And since you have better vision of the floor, please, you can handle that part from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, our colleague Abu Sab, for chairing this part. We know that you have some commitment. Professor Ayman Abu Hadid, he will continue chairing this session. But let me go back and really thank our colleague and the wonderful presentation which you all hear today and we treasure. Professor Paroda has been the champion of trying to not only to build up gene banks. I have witnessed myself 3 times visiting him while he was building the major gene bank, not only for India, but for the whole of Asia. He did have great aspiration. I think the basic funding for this was $24 million, and he was active on this and active in running it later. When he was taking care of agricultural development in Central Asia, he built several gene banks there. Not only this, it's not the structure, it's not building bricks and put cement into it. He was keen that the human infrastructure will be there. And the human infrastructure need training. We, in this region, we talk about the dry area, we are losing our breeders. There is no enough breeders to face that challenge, which Dr. Raj Paroda has mentioned. Because the genetic resources are the building blocks for the future if we are going to stand up and really do something to avert the pressure and the damage which climate change is going to do for humanity. Thank you, Professor Paroda, and keep it up. Namaste.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Beltagi, and I think that I have had a question or a remark. I think Dr. Beltagi have already addressed it in his interaction. So please, Dr. Ali, start your presentation, and we are all ears.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen so that I'm able to put up my presentation. Allow me for a moment. Would you please let me know when you see my screen on the other side?
Not yet. Okay, now it's okay.
Very good. Okay, so thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you, a little bit more information about what's going on with CGIAR and what the response to the rising food prices are. So I will use the opportunity also maybe to
Professor,
share some.
sorry for interruption. Can you please turn off presenter view? From the display settings on the upper part of the screen on the left. No, display settings, not show taskbar. In the upper part of the screen, upper part. Yeah, next to it there is display settings. Can you press it?
Okay.
Just to the right of it.
To the right of it, I have my microphone.
Display settings. Okay.
Yes. Yes, this one. Just click on it.
Are we okay now?
Now
That's
it's okay.
perfect. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much for this. So I will use the opportunity, colleagues, maybe just to give you also a little bit more update about what's going on within the CGIAR. Given that all of you almost have contributed in some form at some point in time to the project. Of course, special thanks to Dr. Adel Beltagi, who has made significant contribution to building IDDC, the institutions for which I am currently the Director General. So I continue to enjoy a lot of great success of the past from many of those who are on the call, and I just want to take the opportunity to recognize that. So, ICARDA today, after it left Syria because of the conflict, has decentralized its operation almost in 16 countries, which continue to be, the basis in which we conduct our research and operations. We continue to develop technologies through a very strong partnership with the National Agricultural Research Institutes, and then that allows us to continue to move technologies and solutions across the globe. A key feature that the CGIAR has, which makes it quite unique compared to many of the other institutes. Of course, to deliver that, you have to work in partnership with many of the other centers. You see on this map what the current distribution of centers are, and they are all quite instrumental in making sure that we are able to provide stronger and better service to the countries we serve.
Can we increase the voice a little bit? I think it's okay. Or you make the computer closer here. Thank you.
Okay, is it better now? Let me switch off my video. Maybe that will also, will help improve the quality. So, is it better now, Dr. Ali?
Yes, the voice is better.
Is it better now?
Okay.
Okay, very good. So, the agriculture, the agroecologies where ICARDA operates, as you all know, are those four, that you see on the screen: the rain-fed, the irrigated, the agropastoral, and the desert farming. Increasingly, with the climate change and variability, the area, as you all know, is witnessing more, rising temperatures with greater water scarcity in the graded lands. And this calls for us to be able to think differently, act differently, and mobilize even newer partnerships to be able to deal with those kind of things. And the CGIAR, in reorganizing itself, has taken a very strong recognition of these particular aspects. The slide that you see basically depicts, how the expected rising temperatures in the area we serve, with Sudan, Chad, and several other countries in the region are going to be hardest hit. This will, of course, as you have all heard and seen from other presentations, would likely reduce, agricultural productivity significantly, possibly up to 30 and 40% by the year 2100. This region is unfortunately plagued with conflict, malnutrition, high population, land degradation, loss of biodiversity, water scarcity, and climate change, which really collectively constitute a perfect storm. This is why the role of science and innovation is actually trying to deal with the complications. What we have seen over the recent past is not just only the COVID situation, but this has been complicated further by the war in Ukraine and Russia, two very important countries in terms of meeting some of the global demands, and with a significant share of production both in wheat, barley, maize. And we've seen significant rising in food prices, something that will eventually destabilize many of the countries, not just in the region, but we are seeing how this is affecting the whole world. Many of you watching the news, the impact of the war on European countries, rising energy prices, making it difficult for people to be able to cope with their daily life requirements. FAO and IFPRI, within the CG, have done a lot of analysis, and we continue to see a significant rise in food prices, particularly over the past couple of years, and there is no expectation that this would ease up anytime soon. So, CGIAR recognized that they have a very important role to play, and through a reformulated system now that brings in many of the centers together under unified governance, it is also recognized that the conventional way of responding one-to-one center to a government is not sufficient given the complexity of the magnitude of the challenges. And this is why we need to look well beyond what an individual center is able to provide. So in a high-level form, the following, the 6 points you see on the screen constitute a high-level response, but of course, at the center level, each center working with other centers are trying to form local response. We've heard from Dr. Ismail, from Raj, from Dr. Bintagi, and all of them, even Dr. Muhyiddin. In fact, it's currently being looked at global level. We need to go to regional, and now need to move to national, because this is really how the solutions are going to be introduced. 6 pillars, basically around real-time analysis for further investment, being able to manage. You need to know and measure what you have so that you're able to provide the right measurement, monitor effectiveness of intervention. Policies, we've seen a lot of policies over the past a few years that continues to contribute and worsen the situation of rising food prices. Invest in climate-friendly agriculture, scaling up innovations. CGIAR has wealth of innovations, including working with national partners that are wealth of innovations across the globe. They need to be mapped, they need to be supported, they need to be scaled up. And of course, with donor support, but the greatest majority of funding needs to come from national budget, has been highlighted by Dr. Muhyiddin in the budget. So, I will share a few slides to tell you how the thinking within the TGIR has been evolved. In the past breeding programs, and it has been highlighted by Dr. Adil Bintagi, Raj, Dr. Ayman, about the need to increase capacity in breeding. Of course, breeders are an essential part, but also the approach for breeding is quite essential. The CGIR recognized that there has been breeding with significant investment across the globe, but it was not so much targeted, it was not so much sharp, it was not so much done for a particular purpose that serves a particular market need or a geography need or a particular agroecology need. So there is currently a new trend to focus on the producing product profiles for which the breeders would work, so that you're able to have fewer areas of targeted investments that can be done at a higher quality with better results, but for a specific purpose. And I think the current situation where we see greater water scarcity, rising temperatures with these extreme climate conditions requires a very different approach, that those areas are targeted with very specific areas of research and collaboration across the globe, across national systems, with support from CGIAR centers that are able to respond to these specific demands. This is also requires significant investments in the accelerated breeding facilities, so that you're able to produce seed within 60 days. You cannot wait 10, 12 years of conventional plant breeding before you can have new varieties that can be released and be put in farmer fields. This is why, with the advanced technologies, there is need to modernize our breeding facility, working with national partners and be able to respond to these challenges. Now, in order to be able to also respond to this, there has been a number of key interventions that are currently designed and being implemented. One of which is focusing on the Siwan region, taking few countries among the initial set of countries to be supported. And these include Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Morocco, but these are basically initial set of countries from which we're going to be scaling up, including opportunities for countries to join as and when funding becomes available. But of course, this regional initiative allows us to also use some of the technologies that have been developed so far. A good example is the heat and drought-tolerant varieties that have been developed in the heat platform in Sudan, which has been taken to a large scale for scaling in Sudan and also in Ethiopia. Some of these heat-tolerant varieties have actually made significant contribution to save the wheat production, or at least to reduce the negative impacts of the recent drought in Morocco. Unless some of those varieties were in farmer fields, the impact of reduced wheat production could have been significant. Chickpea that is heat and drought tolerant. A lot of work in Wadi Midani, but also with ARC in Egypt has been quite significant. One of the approach in the Siwana is to really recognize how you actually deal with the fragility and or the drivers of the fragility, as depicted on this slide: the desertification, the rising food, the drought, the heat. How can you actually leverage technology and innovation so that you are able to help build more sustainable, production system, a better nutrition, and a robust regulation by addressing the whole garment of policy interventions that needs to make it happen. So just a quick overview of the Siwana initiative, one of the 32 new portfolio of the CGIAR. It has 5 key work packages. It has multiples of centers. You have IMI as a partner. You have WorldFish. You have IFPRI. You have CIAT, CIMIT, and many others as participating partners. There are 5 key work packages, one around innovations and scaling through partnerships and policy, one about the biodiversity presentation, third one is around the sustainable, equitable farming systems, the fourth one is about water and estate management, and the fifth one is digitalization and how we can bring all of this together. I want to emphasize that these regional initiatives focus on the scaling, focusing on bringing the outcomes of different initiatives that are focused on breeding, on water management, on agronomy, and bringing them together for them to be scaled up at national level. So the idea here is to be able to do more with less, and you're able to leverage the very scarce water that is available, the very limited land, and the very rich agro-biodiversity to be able to produce it. One of the important areas is to look at opportunities for scaling, leveraging digitalization. There's a lot of work that has been developed by some of our scientists in India, elsewhere, and also by other CGIAR centers. And we want to try and see how we can leverage that to go again from global to regional to a farm level and look at the opportunities to measure and assess and develop decision support systems that could help the countries manage the resources that we have. If I look at the work on small ruminants, there's been a lot of work on genomics of small ruminants, a lot of adaptive, breeding techniques using communities, engaging them in the selection process. The greatest majority of the clients and the farmers we support live in remote areas, and it was so critical to develop techniques that can be taken up at a very large scale with limited infrastructure and with minimum involvement from central system. It's also important to look for opportunities for multi-purpose crops, given that the fact that the deserts are expanding northwards, southwards, and eastwards, and looking for opportunities and crops that can do well within dry conditions and also be able to not just serve the feeding of the humans, but also do well as forages and add value so that you're able to improve the livelihoods of the communities. Barley, cactus is registering excellent progress, particularly in India, Tunisia, Morocco, Jordan, and others. Barley is also making very good progress. I mentioned, the work on the excellence in agronomy, where there is collaborative work, particularly SAT, with, Africa Rice, IITA, and the idea there is to look at ways where you can actually improve the agro management of the crop, leveraging data-driven solutions, working with the smallholder farmers, looking at opportunities for public and private sectors to work together with the idea to do sustainable implementation, leveraging the latest available technologies within the field. Equally important is the work we're doing on, in Morocco, conservation of agricultural diversity, how a combination of multiple crops could give higher revenue, better economies for the farms by way of preserving the environment and improving livelihood. I mentioned earlier on the work we've done in Sudan on the heat research platform. It has been instrumental for us to be able to produce heat and drought-tolerant varieties that we've taken to Ethiopia and Sudan. I'd like to share this great success story from Ethiopia and Sudan, 2 countries that have been able to grow their wheat production up to 375,000 hectares in Sudan, with support from the African Development Bank. Ethiopia as well huge progress, almost 400,000 hectares. But what is important is that the productivity has gone up from 3 to almost up to 7 tons per hectare, which is huge advancements in terms of yield. And of course, the focus now is to, even with less water, and to take this into 12 other African countries to help improve the state of food security. ICARDA, also working with a number of other centers, have been promoting the whole concept of integrated desert farming, focusing on, for example, within the context of the GCC countries, the whole promising date palm production. How would you look at the entire ecosystem by bringing in animals, looking at small scale crop production, processing of byproducts from palm, increasing value addition. 80% of the date palm production globally goes, in developing countries, goes into waste, including in Egypt, which is one of the largest date producing countries. So producing appropriate innovations that could help add value and reduce waste can be an integral part of what we can do. We talked earlier about the productivity gains. I will skip that in the interest of time. I want to share a bit more on this by way of innovations. In Egypt, we've been trying to promote a new approach to mixing barley flour from naked barley, appropriate varieties, with wheat flour. You can mix up to 1/3. To their credit, the National Research Institute and ARC have also been doing a lot of work in this. What we try to do is to try and bring these, experiences and scale it up, taking it up to the right, political bodies, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Supplies. There has been very strong commitment in testing this on a larger scale, recognizing that this can only be successful if you bring in the Ministry of Health because of the important health benefit. If you reduce 1/3 of Egypt's total imports of wheat, you have significant savings on the balance of payment. You need to bring in the youth and to make consumption of barley trendy, so that you create the markets for it. And if you're able to bring in the private sector, the bakeries, it's the entire ecosystem. If you want to bring about change, you need to look at the whole stakeholder chain and be able to promote this with a clear role for each and every one of them. Some of the initial results have proved to be very successful. We're trying to take these technologies to Tunisia, to Lebanon. It's already doing well in Morocco, in Senegal, and some of the other countries. What is missing is to take it up to scale. I'm sharing this experience so that we inspire ourselves about thinking outside the conventional way of insisting to grow what we would like to eat, and possibly look at what we can grow and make ourselves accustomed to eating. I think the future climate change would require a significant change in the behavior of human beings, and we need to start to prepare ourselves for that. There are schools that promote consumption of, for example, insects, which can be very nutritious. In fact, even in Egypt, in some of the African countries, locust is not unusual to be harvested and consumed. But there are plenty of other choices within the agriculture, species that may not necessarily have been explored sufficiently. One of the things we're trying to do is to promote testing and exploration and selection of some of the neglected crops. Some of you have been promoting this. I certainly believe that there is need for greater focus. Some of the crops we consume today, totaling almost 30 or so, constitute less than 1% of the total potential that God has created on the planet with the very rich agrobiodiversity. And it's really up to us to test and to select and promote some of these things. And the solution may be totally outside the 30 crops that we're currently focusing in. Research and science have a very significant role to play here. Let's make sure we push ourselves outside the comfort zone and be able to adapt and be creative. I'm going to stop here in the interest of time and hand over to the chair, and I'll be happy to answer any questions in the remaining 3-4 minutes before we bring this session to close. Back to you, Dr. Ayman. Thank you for the audience. Thank you for the organizers for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Abu Saba. And I think that the role of ICARDA is proven and the importance of it is increasing due to the impact of climate change in the region. And I think that ICARDA is playing a very important role in improving the international cooperation and on the regional level and on the global level. Is there any question from the floor to Dr. Abu Sabah?
Yes.
دكتور بلتاجي تفضل.
Well, I really very good progress is happening in ICARDA, and this is great. The benchmark sites work, and the agroecology zoning is very important for optimization of water use, as mentioned by the director of ICARDA. But we in this region, we need breeders. What has been, there was initially a center which we had hoped for to breed the breeders, young breeders, to work from Central Asia and West and North Africa, as well as in Africa. Can you just give us an idea how this is going on? Because the human infrastructure is very important in this direction.
Very correct, Dr. Adel. This is a very essential part of building the capacity of national partners, but also the CG. So there are two very specific experiences I can share. First, the CGIAR itself is now putting additional focus on modernizing of the breeding infrastructure and methodologies. So through partnership with key countries like India, like some of the advanced research institutes in the European countries, in Australia and the US, and through partnership with the private sector, we are trying to bring in the latest technologies for breeding into the CGIAR. So this is receiving good levels of funding from the CG, and ICARDA in particular has actually doubled its flow of funds under the one CGIAR in the shared portfolio of the system, which is allowing us to start to grow back this kind of things, which has been sort of like gradually being rationalized because of funding limitations. The second part is funding from the Arab Fund for Economic and Social Development for the capacity development. We had a program called the Young Arab Scientists, which offers unique opportunities to all the young scientists to come and visit and work on the ICARDA breeding sites, ICARDA research farms, and learn on the job to bring in joint supervisions between the academia and the research for development that our scientists do on the ground. A program funded by Japan that goes well beyond the Arab region to bring in scientists and young professionals from across the whole space of the drylands, so that they get the right process of training. And of course, the last point is creating a generation of postdocs that can learn on the job and can become the future generation of breeders for the CG. So these are basically the four areas that hopefully responds to your query. But I fully agree with you. This generation breeding, we have a lot of great people, but they're also becoming, part of the higher end of their career, and we need to invest in the new generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mohsen Shukri.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman. Good morning, Dr. Ali. Thank you for your good presentations. And I wanted to ask about...
Can you switch on the mic, please?
Yes. Dr. Ayman, thank you, Dr. Ali. I hope to ask you about the activities of ICARDA in livestock, especially in ruminants. I see that from your presentation, it is few or small activities about this point in the MENA regions. Thank you, sir.
I think your observation is correct. I could have presented a little bit more. But the focus of our work within the small ruminant space has taken a significant focus on the socio-economic aspects, making sure that we work with the community, working with the national partners, supporting the local programs, not so much on creation of new breeds, but more on health aspects reproduction aspects, community breeding programs, empowering the local communities to be able to actually do a lot more within the space. And I think within the 1CG, the focus is now on trying to bring in greater synergies where expertise on small ruminants exists, working with CIAT, ILRI, and ICARDA to try and bring in greater focus on lower emissions through better mixing of feedstock, alternative options for fodder like using of cactus and certain varieties of barley, byproducts of date palm, so that you're able to provide options for the herders to access feed during dry conditions. So that's basically has been the focus of our work, but I think in the next presentation, I will definitely make sure I speak a little bit more about the work we're doing in the small ruminants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that yesterday we missed His Excellency Dr. Muhammad Awad Tajuddin in the presentation of the first day. I think he is now with us on the internet. Is Dr. Tajuddin, are you there?
Professor.
Okay. Then we have another question and remark for Raj Paruda. Raj, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Dr. Salah.
Microphone, yeah, Dr. Salah.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Hello, Dr. Paroda. I'm glad that we have you here in this very great conference. And I have just a comment. We all speak about, precision
Could you
agriculture.
kindly speak a little loudly?
Yes, sir. Everybody is talking about the precision agriculture and new technology being developed in the sector of agriculture. And I think we are here at this side of the world. We need all of those new technology and innovation be available for the people who are in need for them. The problem that is always on the top is that most of the companies or giant multinational companies, you know what I'm trying to say actually here, sir. They add lots of benefits over those new innovation and to make them unavailable for the farmer who actually need them the most. So I think we need to be accurate in this. I mean, to be active in this. Make the new technology, the new developments available for the people who needs them freely, if it's possible. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's very relevant question that you have raised. We had similar problem when we tried to introduce BT cotton in India. Firstly, you have to convince the policy makers, and I do see role of this scientific community to convince about advantage of any innovation for the benefit of smallholder farmers. And we were convinced that if this technology is not there, there were suicides by the farmers, maximum pesticide use was in cotton, and we were importing cotton at that time. So we tried to establish partnership with Monsanto, with the government, but then found environment not right. So we encouraged private partnership of Myco seed company in India with that of Monsanto, and provided them enabling environment through testing and regulatory system approval. This in 2001 enabled us to release it, and what has happened? We are the largest exporter of cotton and the largest producer of cotton today. We are fetching about $4 billion US, and our pesticide use has gone down by 40%. So the question is, there are efforts which are needed. It is not easy, I can agree, because private sector would not come forward, but they have a cap in terms of licensing fee for their innovation, which has to be understood. But we have still the problem of using this technology. GM is there in case of soybean, maize, also in canola, and we want it, but we are not able to convince the policymakers after having got PT cotton in India 2 decades ago. So there are issues. Sometimes the policy support is not there, but no doubt effort is required. And who is going to convince policymakers if something is good for our resource poor farmers?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Paruda. Now we come to the end of the first part of the session. I would like to thank Professor Raj Paruda on his presentation and on contribution of the answer of the addressed the questions. I would like also to thank Dr. Ali Abu Saba for chairing the first part of the session. And now we can move to the second part of the session for